you today. The importance of this speech is monumental. It's about your body language when you give a presentation. Would any of you guys be able to listen to a speech that starts off that way? Someone took the stage, didn't smile, head down, cowering behind the lectern. You make yourself as small as possible. That's a defense mechanism. I could be telling you how to cure cancer, and you could only take about 1 or 2 minutes of that speech. You would be off in Never Never Land thinking about what's for dinner, how good the blueberry muffins are. You just would not be listening to me. What are you saying starts with a number? 55%. Anybody tell me what 55% might represent?
The amount of the message people hear.
No. But good try. Anybody?
Are we getting body language?
55% of what you say is communicated non-verbally. So more than what you're actually saying is communicated with your body, your facial expressions, your gestures. So there's 45% left. Of course, I'm going to ask, and you're like, oh, it's a trick question. But 45%, is it the words that you say? Anybody care to guess how much of a percentage you think the next is going to be?
10.
20, 10, 5. Is that the words that you say? No. 38% of what you say is communicated vocally. The diction, the tone, the articulation, how you say things. This is really important, and this is why we're in Toastmasters. Anybody can start talking. The body language, how you say things, that is where we really start to hone our skills. 7% is remaining. 7% of what you say is communicated verbally. Those are the words that you actually say. That's why I could be standing here at this lectern, cowering, nervous, defense mechanisms, crossing my legs, keeping barriers between me and you, no eye contact. Y'all wouldn't hear me. Y'all would see someone who you don't trust or you don't have confidence in. Ralph Waldo Emerson made this, he said this, he said, what you are speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you actually say. And that goes to the exact point of what we just went over. Who you are, that's your body language, how you're saying it. That is what he's saying here. That's who you are. So what you actually say is irrelevant. It's mute. I'm going to give you 10 points, 10 powerful tips on how to give a better presentation anytime you present. World Championship of Speaking, classrooms. I don't know if you give law presentations at all. Anywhere you do these presentations, this body language is going to help you out. Number one thing that I can recommend, and I stole this from Amy Cuddy. She gave a TED Talk on this. My speech hopefully is not as long as hers, but she gave a 20-minute speech on the power pose. The power pose, she decided to take this study. She put people in isolation. She said, I want you to do this power pose for 2 minutes. Okay? 2 minutes. And we're going to have you come out and do something. An interview, a public speech, anything. She even put one and said, are you going to gamble more? She rolled the dice. Who's going to gamble more? So the people who did this power pose for 2 minutes, they ended up more confident and less stressed. I love this picture. I was going through looking for some good pictures of power poses, and I saw this and I was like, that's perfect, because it worked for the Lion King. That guy was confident. You know who else it works for? Little kids. You ever seen a little kid superhero? Do they lack confidence at all? No, they don't. And of course, the number one power poser of the universe, Superman. Unless he's around Lex Luthor, he's the most confident guy you'll ever see. It works for Superman, it works for little kids, and it worked in The Lion King. It'll work for you too. I told Ray I had to use the restroom, and I legitimately did. But I stood in there just for a minute. Didn't even take 2 minutes. Stood there for a minute. I got this. More confident, less stress. Number 2, we want to make the audience comfortable with our speech, with who we are. Best way to do that is to smile. An authentic smile, not a cheesy, hi everybody. It's just like when I came up here, I didn't smile. Gloomy. What that does is, it does 3 things to that audience for you. It shows that you are confident. You are comfortable. You're happy. You're welcoming. You're grateful for being able to provide that speech. Even if they asked you, they didn't have to ask you. Smile. Be happy that they asked you. And then smiling allows them to trust that you are explaining something positive and beneficial. As I said, I could be telling you the cure for cancer and you wouldn't listen to me. That's beneficial and that's positive. But if I'm not smiling, you won't hear me. Don't be like Droopy Dog. Some of you know who this is, some of you don't, and that's okay. But this is exactly what Droopy Dog did. He stared in the camera. I'm so happy. He rarely smiled. Don't be like Droopy Dog. Don't say you're happy and don't smile. Number 3, let's engage the people of our audience. How do we do that? Eye contact. Gestures. Using your hands, using your arms. Eye contact is one of the number 1 things that people look for. It's the way they keep attention. If I walked around the room, you would pay attention. But I don't have to walk around the room. I can stand here and look at each and every one of you. Matt just did. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me, and he immediately looked up. You felt me looking at you, and you looked up. It's a way of keeping people's attention. It's odd. It's got to be psychosomatic or something up in the brain. But keeping the eye helps you keep attention with people. Now, how do you do this in your presentation? Well, you have to know your material, otherwise constantly looking at the screen, you'll be constantly looking at your notes, you won't be able to move around, you won't have that stage presence. I have to caution you when you're doing arms and hands. And the reason why is there are okay hand motions, gestures, and there are bad ones. This is a bad one. You are going to think, wow, he's aggressive, or please don't punch me. This is a good one. We'll talk about this one in a minute. This one is a good one in some countries. Not all countries. Just so you know.
Yeah.
So, using your hands, keep them open if you can. If you have something in your hand, try and keep your hands still open. One very powerful gesture that you can make with your hands where you're still open is this. Some people call it a power pyramid, some people call it a teepee. This is a very powerful, confident gesture that you'll see a lot of world-renowned public speakers make. Number 4, let's demonstrate some authority. How do we do that? Well, we have to let the audience learn to trust us. When we come on stage, we smile. And then, if we're staying at the lectern, we use small and stiff gestures. Toastmasters International suggests you always use a gesture from your shoulders, not your elbows. And the reason for that is this kind of looks funny. Looks like I'm a band director. Okay? Whereas this using your shoulders, you have the full range of motion. You can slow this down more so than your elbow. And one thing that helps you build that trust when you're using those small gestures, I want you to think of a presidential speech. Not presidential elect speeches, just because those tend to get more passionate. But a presidential speech, State of the Unions. Most of the time they're sitting down or they might be at a podium, but they never leave the podium. They use this small area, and what that does is that builds the trust of people. They hardly ever use wide ranges. So when you come onto stage, I don't want you going like this. Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Some people might look at you like you're crazy. I've been to someone who spoke like that. Wendy can attest to this. We thought he was crazy. A phenomenal speaker after we learned to trust what he was saying and do. Number 5, let's bring movement to your speech. How do we do that? Walk the space that you have. This is what I was saying earlier, is this kind of area, I'm not going to walk through the chairs or anything like that. But did you ever have a teacher who walked through the aisles of the desks? Why did they do that?
I did it so I could see what the students were using on their laptops while I was giving my speech.
Did it keep them?
Presentation.
It kept them attentive as well,
Absolutely.
correct? This is a great way to keep your audience attention. Keeps them engaged. I can come over here. She might feel a little uncomfortable, so I'm not going to stay here forever. So smaller stages require you to walk but not pace a little bit more often. We don't ever want to invade somebody's bubble if we're in a smaller room. Number 6, go back to keeping your audience's attention. Don't let them get bored. I've never had a speaker look like this clown, but when I was doing the PowerPoint, I saw him in his hand. It's really kind of cool. It's like, that's the way to keep my attention. I'm still working on this one. But you don't want to use the same gestures over and over again. If you have different points, try and find a different gesture, facial expression, and that's what this objective is actually all about for this project, is learning how to do those different things that work a little bit better. And that keeps your attention. If I did the same thing over and over again, it might look like Kathy over here. I'm bored. I'm sick, but I'm bored. It's almost a Let's draw attention to a certain element of the presentation. This is really cool. So I had a bear meeting earlier. I was the general evaluator. Couldn't have set it up any better. The presenters today, one of them kept doing this, and as soon as he did this, everyone looked at the screen. Now, as Toastmasters, we know this is not a good stance for a presenter, right? You don't ever want to come this way. You want to keep your shoulders square. I had another one who actually did this. We have a really small, long room. He stood over the other presenter so everyone could see the screen, and he clicked, and I felt so bad for this guy. It was great, though, because he kept the attention where he wanted the attention. He tried to draw himself out. When I look at the screen, you all look at the screen. If I point at the screen, most of you will look at the screen as well. One of the great things that this does is it allows me to look at my notes if you look away. And you may or may not ever see that. Skilled evaluators like Gary have seen it about 7 times so far, if not more. Number 8, encourage participation. Be careful about this one. Like I said, you don't want to intrude in somebody's bubble. But if you know them and you're comfortable with them and you're speaking and someone throws something at you, you might just touch them on the shoulder. Keep them engaged. Walking around. If you've ever seen Dave Ramsey give a speech, one of the things that he does is he actually talks and asks them stand up and speak. He kind of does a table topics thing. You keep them engaged. walking around is the best way to keep that open gesture and keeping them participating in the speech. Again, if you don't know the people, as in, I know John a little, but I'm not going to go over there and give him a hug. I don't know him that well. I don't want to intrude in his bubble. Number 9, make the hard questions seem easier. Uwe, I think, is one of the only people in this club that I've seen so far who's given a presentation and offered questions at the end. Phenomenal. But what happens when you get that really hard question? I know I'm late, and I'm sorry. What happens when you get that really hard question? Well, take a minute and breathe. Okay? Pause. It's okay. This is one of the best things that you can do, and I want to really reiterate that you can use this for table topics. If you're called on it for a question in table topics, you don't have to immediately stand up and just start speaking. Pause. Breathe. Do a power pose. Get your confidence up. Lower your stress a little bit. Also, look in the eye of the people who are asking the question. That actually happened earlier today as well. The guy who was asking the questions wasn't looking them in the eye. I was like, how are they supposed to have a conversation with you? You're not going to have that conversation if you look away or if you sit down or anything like that. Last one. Told you it was a long speech, guys. Make your audience buy your story. I don't physically mean pay money unless they paid money to actually hear you speak. If they did, congratulations, you made it. You're a professional speaker once you've been paid. One of the cool things about salesmanship or just building rapport with people is mirroring their body language. So if I was talking to John, I would probably come over here and start talking to him like this, because he's got his hand on his hip. This is a mirror image. You do that, that's going to be the fastest way you can get to build rapport with those people. You get to nod. You get to say, yes, I'm listening to you, or why don't you give me a little bit of your input and I can hear that back. Keep smiling. Smiling is still the most important thing in the entire presentation. You smile as much as you can. I promise you'll not only feel more confident, but they'll feel more confident with you. They'll give you that trust. So those are my 10 powerful body language tips for your next presentation. And yes, I did steal the presentation. I'm green again. I'm good to go. But if you want to know even more about body language, Toastmasters International offers this great free downloadable book. It's called Gestures Your Body Speaks. This is basically a lot longer introduction of what's actually in your Competent Communicator's Manual. I've been Googling for hours, and I will tell you, happily tell you, everything that Mr. Google has taught me about body language and everything else on that topic. I think it's truly fascinating. That's why I like the show Lie to Me. Micro expressions, it's one of my favorite things in the world. It's so important that we just not use our words correctly, but use our bodies. So I have to ask, when you give a presentation, what are you saying? Right?